It's not just sacred ground. It's a complex world of architecture, collections, and centuries-old influence. The Vatican isn't defined by borders, but by the cultural weight it carries. Recognized by UNESCO, it stands as a living record of human achievement. This video uncovers how a space this small holds such a global legacy. Tucked inside the city of Rome, the Vatican City is the smallest independent country in the world. With just over 44 hectares, it occupies a walled enclave on the western bank of the Tiber River, not far from the center of the Italian capital. It serves as the territorial base of the Holy See, the central governing authority of the Catholic Church, giving it both religious and diplomatic significance. Getting there is surprisingly simple. Visitors coming from abroad usually land at Fiumicino or Ciampino airports, both located in the greater Rome area. From there, it's just a short ride by train, taxi, or metro. The closest metro stop is Ottaviano San Pietro, just a few minutes' walk from the main entrance to the Vatican Museums and St. Peter's Square. Although Vatican City is fully surrounded by Rome, it maintains strict physical boundaries. Tall stone walls, gates, and border checkpoints define its limits. While there are no customs or passport checks for tourists, the entrances are monitored closely by Vatican security personnel and Swiss guards, especially at points leading into sensitive or restricted areas. Inside, the territory is organized in distinct zones. There's the religious core, home to St. Peter's Basilica, the Apostolic Palace, and the Vatican Museums. The administrative sector hosts the Curia and offices of the Holy See. There are also residential areas for clergy and officials, internal gardens, and diplomatic spaces. Despite its size, Vatican City is home to around 800 residents, the vast majority of whom are clergy, members of religious orders, and officials working for the Holy See. Citizenship is not granted by birth, but assigned based on role and function, and often expires when the individual's official duties end. The concept of extraterritoriality plays a unique role in the Vatican's legal geography. Within the boundaries of Vatican City, the heritage site includes St. Peter's Basilica, St. Peter's Square, the Vatican Museums, the Sistine Chapel, the Vatican Gardens, the Apostolic Palace, and other internal buildings that support its religious, cultural, and administrative life. Several buildings in Rome, including certain basilicas and papal properties, are not located within Vatican territory, but are granted special status by international agreement. They are legally part of the Holy See's sovereign domain and enjoy protections similar to those of embassies. While the Vatican City itself is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site under Listing 286, these additional properties belong to a separate inscription, UNESCO Listing 91, which includes the historic center of Rome and the extraterritorial holdings of the Holy See within the city. Together, they form a unified and historically dense complex that reflects centuries of continuity and global significance, all concentrated within the smallest country in the world. At the start of the 1st century BCE, the area west of the Tiber River, known as the Ager Vaticanus, remained outside the formal boundaries of ancient Rome. It was a low-lying floodplain, primarily agricultural, with sporadic use for private estates and burial grounds. While not considered part of the sacred pomerium, it had strategic and practical value for elite Roman families who built gardens and villas in the region. Under Augustus, land use became more structured, and infrastructure such as roads and aqueducts extended into the Vatican plain, reflecting growing urban pressure on Rome's periphery. During the reigns of Tiberius and Caligula in the early 1st century CE, the area saw a significant shift. Caligula commissioned the construction of a circus in the Horti Agrippinae, gardens that belonged to his mother's lineage. This structure, later known as the Circus of Nero, became one of the dominant features of the Augur Vaticanus. Unlike the Grand Circus Maximus, it served more exclusive and imperial functions, including private games and displays. The circus also shaped the future orientation of urban development in the zone, setting a longitudinal axis that would influence later architectural decisions. According to Roman-era sources and early Christian tradition, the Apostle Peter was executed in this area during the persecutions that followed the Great Fire of 64 CE, allegedly within the confines of Nero's circus. His burial near the adjacent necropolis began to attract attention in the decades that followed, especially among Christian groups. While there was no formal pilgrimage infrastructure at the time, the memory of the location gained significance, contributing to a slow but steady flow of devotees to the site. This early reverence laid the groundwork for its future role as a focal point of Christian commemoration. By the mid-1st century, the Vatican slope and adjacent land had become a densely layered funerary zone. Roman law forbade burials within the city walls, so families from various social classes built tombs along the roads leading into Rome, including the Via Cornelia and Via Triumphalis, both cutting through the Vatican zone. Mausoleums from this period feature complex brickwork, stucco decoration, and Latin inscriptions. In the 2nd century CE, under emperors like Hadrian and Antoninus Pius, the area maintained its character as a liminal urban edge, densely occupied by tombs, but also dotted with gardens and estate fragments. The monumental development of the city center during this time coincided with continued expansion westward, and the Augur Vaticanus became more connected through infrastructure. Drainage systems were improved, road networks reinforced, and nearby aqueducts ensured the viability of both agriculture and construction. It was still not part of the core political heart of the empire, but it was no longer marginal either. The beginning of the 4th century marks a turning point. Following the rise of Constantine and the Edict of Milan, the Vatican zone began to acquire new visibility within the imperial framework. Though still a peripheral district, Constantine's decision to construct a monumental basilica on the site, not yet explored here in religious terms, was both political and urban in nature. By then, Christianity had already gained legal status and imperial favor, and Constantine's actions aligned with broader efforts to consolidate its role within Roman society. Building over the area traditionally associated with Peter's burial served not only devotional aims, but also reinforced state authority through architecture. The dismantling of portions of the necropolis and the transformation of the Vatican slope into a ceremonial zone laid the groundwork for one of the most strategically symbolic urban projects of the late Empire. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the late 5th century, Rome fragmented politically and declined economically. But the Vatican area remained active due to the basilica that stood over Peter's tomb. In the early 6th century, Pope Symmachus commissioned a fortified residence next to the basilica, offering an operational alternative to the damaged Lateran complex. Over the next 2 centuries, the Vatican existed in a state of dual influence. It was technically under the control of the Byzantine Empire, but popes operated with increasing autonomy. This tension set the stage for new alliances, most notably with the Frankish kingdom. In 756, Pepin the Short granted papal control over large swaths of central Italy, an act that gave birth to the Papal States. Although the Vatican itself remained modest in scale, its role shifted from sacred site to the nucleus of a territorial power. That transformation became evident in 800, when Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as emperor inside the basilica, fusing spiritual authority with imperial legitimacy. Throughout the 9th century, the Vatican was also exposed to external threats. In 846, Arab raiders attacked and looted St. Peter's Basilica. The response was immediate and strategic. Pope Leo IV ordered the construction of a massive defensive wall to enclose the area, completed in 852. The creation of the Leonine city provided not only protection, but a defined urban footprint, giving the Vatican a physical identity separate from the rest of Rome. The Carolingian Renaissance reinforced the Vatican's cultural standing. Scriptoria were established to copy and preserve classical and religious texts, while liturgical music and manuscript illumination flourished under papal oversight. Even as Rome's population shrank, the Basilica continued to host diplomatic gatherings, imperial coronations, and ecclesiastical synods. Pilgrims from across Europe came to venerate Peter's tomb, creating a steady flow of visitors that sustained the area's economy and visibility. The 10th and 11th centuries were more turbulent. Noble Roman families, such as the Theophylax and the Crescentii, exerted heavy influence over papal elections, often treating the office as hereditary privilege. This period saw several short-lived pontificates and weakened institutional coherence. Yet, reforms eventually gained momentum. The 11th century Gregorian reform, driven by Pope Gregory VII, restructured the Vatican's bureaucracy, tightened clerical discipline, and reinforced the independence of papal authority. These changes were mirrored spatially. Buildings were upgraded, curial offices took clearer shape, and the papal court became more functionally centralized. By the 12th century, infrastructure expanded in response to a rising number of pilgrims and the increasing complexity of church administration. Popes such as Eugene III and Innocent III invested in new residences, ceremonial halls, and defensive features. The Borgo, the neighborhood surrounding the Vatican, grew into a vital support zone filled with markets, inns, and services aimed at clergy, visitors, and diplomats. The Vatican was no longer just sacred ground. It was now a lived environment tied to power, logistics, and governance. In the 13th century, fortification continued. A secure passage, the Passetto di Borgo, was built to link the Vatican directly to Castel Sant'Angelo, ensuring an escape route in case of attack. The Vatican also remained diplomatically active, hosting royal envoys, forging alliances, and resolving disputes through ecclesiastical courts. The early 14th century marked a rupture. In 1309, Pope Clement V relocated the papal court to Avignon, shifting the administrative and symbolic heart of the church away from Rome. Political unrest in the city and growing pressure from the French crown made the move appear strategic, but the consequences were lasting. For nearly 70 years, the Vatican was left behind, physically intact but institutionally sidelined. Without the presence of the papacy, its buildings deteriorated, its gardens fell into disuse, and its authority weakened. Pilgrims were redirected, funding slowed, and the rhythm of activity that once defined the space nearly stopped. When Pope Gregory XI returned to Rome in 1377, the damage was clear, but the real crisis was just beginning. His death the following year sparked a disputed conclave in a tense and divided city. Under pressure from the Roman populace, the cardinals elected Urban VI, but his temperament and reform agenda quickly alienated many within the Curia, which comprises the administrative institutions of the Holy See. A faction of cardinals declared his election invalid and chose a rival pope, Clement VII, who re-established the court in Avignon. Europe became divided. France, Scotland, and parts of Spain supported Avignon, while England, the Holy Roman Empire, and most of Italy recognized Rome. The result was a church with two competing papacies, each claiming legitimacy, excommunicating the other, and establishing parallel administrations. This situation persisted for decades, entrenching institutional confusion. In 1409, an attempt to resolve the crisis through the Council of Pisa only deepened the divide. A third claimant, Alexander V, was elected, but the existing popes refused to step down. The church now had three concurrent papal claimants, each with their own courts, seals, and followers. It was the Western Schism, or Papal Schism. The Vatican, under the Roman line, remained active, but its authority was diluted, and its ability to govern the church as a whole had collapsed. Resolution came only with the Council of Constance, convened from 1414 to 1418. Backed by secular rulers, the council asserted its authority over the papacy and forced a settlement. The Avignon Pope resigned, the Pisan line was deposed, and the Roman Pope, Gregory XII, agreed to step down voluntarily, a move that helped preserve the legal continuity of the papacy. In 1417, the council elected Martin V as the sole legitimate pope. His installation marked the end of the schism and the beginning of a new phase of papal consolidation. Martin V established himself in Rome and recentered the Church's administration in the Vatican. Though the infrastructure still bore the scars of neglect, the symbolic power of unity had returned. The Vatican once again served as the seat of a singular pope, and with that came the renewal of its institutional authority. Restoration began slowly, rebuilding trust, reforming offices, and re-establishing diplomatic ties. The 15th and 16th centuries marked a turning point for the Vatican, not only in style but in structure. After the instability of the Great Western Schism, the papacy sought to reassert central authority. Administrative reforms, tighter control over bishops, and the consolidation of Roman institutions turned the Vatican into the operational core of the Catholic world. Cultural patronage played a strategic role in that effort. Popes commissioned vast architectural projects and visual narratives to restore prestige and assert continuity with classical antiquity. The decision to demolish the old Constantinian Basilica and construct a new St. Peter's reflected more than ambition. It was a statement of permanence. Bramante's symmetrical plans and Michelangelo's monumental dome reimagined spiritual space as a declaration of order and vision. Raphael's frescoes in the papal apartments layered mythology, politics, and theology in service of institutional messaging. But the Renaissance wasn't only a time of construction, it was also a moment of deep fracture. In 1517, Martin Luther's theses triggered a wave of dissent that challenged papal authority across Europe. The Vatican responded not just with dogma, but with organization. The Roman Inquisition, the index of prohibited books, and new congregations were created to confront the spread of Protestant ideas. The Council of Trent, held between 1545 and 1563, set in motion a broad institutional reform that would reshape the Church's internal structure and external posture. At the same time, the world beyond Europe was shifting. Papal bulls helped define colonial spheres between Spain and Portugal, and missionary activity expanded across Asia, Africa, and the Americas. The Vatican became a global actor, mediating between empires, issuing theological justifications for conquest, and integrating new knowledge and artifacts into its collections. Throughout this period, the Vatican museums began to take shape. What started as personal collections of antiquities evolved into spaces of curated identity, places where the Church not only preserved history, but framed it. The Belvedere courtyard became a laboratory for sculpture, display, and intellectual exchange. The Vatican was no longer only a place of pilgrimage. It was now a stage for authority, an archive of empire, and the headquarters of a global institution navigating both cultural revival and religious upheaval. The Baroque period brought visual spectacle and institutional growth to the Vatican. Commissioned by Pope Alexander VII, Bernini's redesign of St. Peter's Square in the 1600s turned the space into a stage of power, architecture guiding the eye and body toward religious and political authority. But behind the colonnades, the Vatican was also expanding as the administrative core of the Papal States, which stretched across central Italy. Popes restructured the Roman Curia, strengthened diplomatic networks, and dealt with growing tensions across Europe, especially with France and the Holy Roman Empire. It was also a time of control. The Vatican positioned itself as the guardian of orthodoxy. The Holy Office enforced doctrinal limits, responding to internal challenges like the rise of Gallicanism in France and Jansenism, and external shifts brought by emerging Enlightenment thought. Through censorship and bureaucracy, the Vatican worked to preserve its authority in a rapidly changing world. art and ritual remained essential tools. Papal patronage attracted leading artists, architects, and composers, their work reinforcing messages of order and obedience. At the same time, religious orders expanded globally, returning with knowledge, artifacts, and reports that enriched Vatican collections and archives. By the 1700s, the Vatican had become not just a religious capital, but a center of information, diplomacy, and cultural projection. The 19th century was marked by upheaval and loss for the Vatican. With the unification of Italy gaining momentum, Rome became a strategic and symbolic prize. In 1870, Italian troops entered the city and annexed the Papal States, effectively ending centuries of temporal rule. The Vatican was left with no legal autonomy. Then Pope Pius IX refused to recognize the new regime. He declared himself a prisoner in the Vatican, withdrawing from public life and refusing to step outside the walls. For the next 59 years, successive popes remained within the confines of the Vatican, abstaining from public appearances beyond its territory and refusing diplomatic contact with the Italian government. Although isolated politically, the Vatican continued to operate as a cultural and religious center. Inside the walls, work on preservation, study, and organization of its collections intensified. The absence of political influence in Italian affairs did not diminish the Vatican's symbolic status. On the contrary, the image of resistance, of a state under siege, added an aura of dignity and endurance. The prisoner status, while restrictive, gave the Vatican a narrative of continuity against the tide of nationalism and secularization. After nearly 6 decades of deadlock, the conflict between the Vatican and the Italian state came to a close with the signing of the Lateran Treaty in 1929. Negotiated under Benito Mussolini and Pope Pius XI, the agreement established Vatican City as an independent sovereign state under international law. It granted full autonomy, defined precise territorial boundaries, and offered financial compensation for the loss of the Papal States. For the first time, the Vatican had both spiritual and legal sovereignty, a dual identity that allowed it to function as a neutral actor on the global stage. With its independence secured, the Vatican moved quickly to adapt. Diplomatic relations were formalized, a new constitution was introduced, and administrative functions were updated. The Vatican began issuing its own stamps, currency, and official documents. While the Lateran Treaty settled territorial disputes, it also paved the way for the Vatican's expanded cultural and political engagement with the rest of the world. During this time, the Vatican strengthened its internal institutions, including the Vatican Library, the secret archives, and the museums. This was also the beginning of a modernized, media-savvy Vatican, one that could project its messages globally, particularly through Vatican Radio, which launched in 1931. Though small in size, the state now had a voice that reached far beyond its walls. Diplomatically, the Vatican expanded its global presence. It developed one of the most extensive diplomatic networks on the planet, maintaining formal relations with the majority of UN member states. Since 1964, it has held permanent observer status at the United Nations, allowing participation in international debates without becoming a voting member. Over the decades, it signed dozens of bilateral agreements and concordats, addressing not only religious matters, but also issues related to education, heritage, and the legal recognition of its status. This evolution allowed the Vatican to operate on the global stage with a level of influence disproportionate to its size. Internally, the administrative framework of the Vatican continued to evolve. In the early 2000s, its penal code was revised to align with international standards, and new offices were introduced to strengthen institutional accountability. In the digital age, the Vatican has embraced technology to protect and share its heritage. Massive digitization efforts have placed thousands of documents, artworks, and books online. Today, the Vatican exists not only as a seat of religious authority, but as a curated city-state, one that safeguards fragments of the ancient world illuminates the achievements of the Renaissance, and adapts to the present with a sense of responsibility toward the future. It is a space where architecture, ritual, diplomacy, and preservation all coexist, not frozen in time, but actively participating in how time is remembered. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also check our playlist for more incredible World Heritage sites. St. Peter's Basilica stands not only as the largest church in the world, but as one of the most powerful architectural expressions of faith ever built. Architects like Bramante, Michelangelo, and Carlo Maderno brought Renaissance and Baroque ideals into a single structure, from the soaring dome to the massive nave that holds up to 60,000 people. Bernini's bronze baldachin rises above the papal altar, marking the heart of the basilica. Michelangelo's Pietà, positioned near the entrance, draws visitors into a quiet moment of reflection. Reaching the top of St. Peter's Dome is a separate experience. The sheer scale is difficult to grasp at once. It reaches 136 meters in height. Designed in part by Michelangelo and completed after his death, the dome remains one of the most impressive engineering feats of its time. At the top, the open-air platform provides one of the most breathtaking panoramas of Rome. St. Peter's Square, designed by Gian Lorenzo Bernini in the 17th century, is far more than an open space. It's a calculated theatrical setting, framed by an elliptical colonnade of 284 columns, arranged in 4 rows. This embrace of architecture symbolizes the church reaching out to the world, a gesture of unity, order, and welcome. At the center of the square stands an ancient Egyptian obelisk, relocated here in 1586. Originally from Heliopolis and later brought to Rome by Caligula, the obelisk acts as a silent witness to centuries of transformation. The square has been the stage for countless historic moments: papal conclaves, public blessings, Easter celebrations, and announcements that marked global Catholic history. Inside the Vatican museums, no space is more anticipated, or more tightly packed, than the Sistine Chapel. Built in the late 15th century under Pope Sixtus IV, the chapel originally served as the Pope's private place of worship and a site for major papal ceremonies. Its fame exploded after Michelangelo painted the ceiling between 1508 and 1512, transforming it into one of the most admired artistic achievements in the world. Not far from the Sistine Chapel, a sequence of rooms known as the Raphael Rooms, or Stanze di Raffaello, reveals another masterpiece of Renaissance art. Commissioned by Pope Julius II in the early 16th century, the rooms were intended to be part of the papal apartment. Raphael painted 4 of them, each with a thematic program that combined theology, history, philosophy, and allegory. Beyond these focal points, the Vatican museums offer an overwhelming array of galleries, courtyards, and collections. Founded by Pope Julius II in the early 1500s, the museums now house over 70,000 works across more than 50 galleries. Visitors follow a predetermined route that winds through sculpture halls, Etruscan artifacts, ancient Egyptian collections, rooms of cartography, galleries of contemporary religious art, and more. Among the many highlights is the Gallery of Maps, a long, vaulted corridor painted in the late 16th century under Pope Gregory XIII. The gallery contains 40 topographical maps of the Italian regions and papal properties, painted directly onto the walls with stunning detail. Each map is framed by decorative borders filled with symbolic imagery, coats of arms, and painted architecture. Other highlights include the Gallery of the Candelabra and the Gallery of Tapestries. The former displays rows of ancient sculptures alongside ornate candelabra and richly decorated ceilings. The latter, lined with large Flemish tapestries, presents biblical scenes woven with gold and silver thread. The Gregorian Etruscan Museum, founded in 1837 by Pope Gregory XVI, Created with the purpose of preserving ancient artifacts found across central Italy, its collection offers a rare window into the world of the Etruscans, a civilization that flourished before Rome's dominance. Here, ceramic vessels, bronze mirrors, jewelry, and sarcophagi speak of a people who influenced Roman religion, language, and burial customs. Among the most significant objects is the Mars of Todi, a bronze statue from the 5th century BCE, striking for its anatomical detail and spiritual aura. In a nearby wing, the Gregorian Egyptian Museum showcases another ancient civilization. Formed in part through acquisitions from Villa Adriana and other archaeological sites, the collection features sarcophagi, canopic jars, statues of pharaohs, and animal mummies. The Pio Cristiano Museum takes the visitor into the early centuries of Christian art. Its galleries are filled with sarcophagi, inscriptions, and mosaics from the 2nd to 5th centuries, many of them retrieved from Roman catacombs. These works capture a moment of transformation, when Christianity was moving from the margins of empire to its very center. The Pinacoteca Vaticana, though less frequented than the Sistine Chapel, holds some of the most important paintings in Western art. Works by Giotto, Fra Angelico, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, and Caravaggio trace the evolution of religious painting across centuries. The Ethnological Museum, formerly known as the Missionary Museum, presents a very different focus. Its rooms contain objects from Africa, Asia, Oceania, and the Americas, ceremonial masks, textiles, tools, and ritual artifacts collected from mission territories or diplomatic exchanges. Though historically tied to Catholic missions, the museum today seeks to frame these items within broader narratives of cultural identity and dialogue. Tucked into a separate space is the Sala delle Nozze Aldobrandine, home to one of the rarest surviving examples of ancient Roman wall painting. The fresco, known as the Aldobrandini Wedding, dates back to the early imperial period. The artwork, likely removed from a noble Roman house, offers insight into private life and decorative style during a time when most visual records favored public monuments. In another quiet gallery, the Jewish lapidary presents an unexpected narrative. This collection of funerary inscriptions and stone fragments comes from Jewish catacombs discovered in Rome. Written in Greek and Latin, with Hebrew symbols carved among them, these epitaphs speak of a Jewish presence integrated into Roman life, yet distinct in belief. The Sala dell'Immacolata celebrates one of the key theological doctrines of the Catholic Church, the Immaculate Conception. Created to commemorate its formal declaration in 1854, the room is adorned with large-scale frescoes depicting scenes from Marian tradition. Artists like Francesco Podesti filled the walls with narrative panels, combining theological symbolism with 19th century Romantic style. The Vatican's Historical Museum and Carriage Pavilion tell the story of papal transport and ceremonial mobility. Here, ornate carriages from the 18th and 19th centuries stand beside early motor vehicles, including the first Pope-mobile used during outdoor appearances. These vehicles are not simply curiosities. They reflect changing modes of public engagement, visibility, and authority. Hidden under the Vatican's museums and courtyards lies a world many visitors never see, one layered with traces of ancient life. The necropolis of the Via Triumphalis is one such place. Discovered during late 20th century construction works just beyond the Vatican museums, it preserves a series of Roman-era tombs dating from the 1st to 4th centuries CE. These burial sites belonged to ordinary citizens, merchants, freedmen, and workers who lived and died under the shadow of imperial Rome. At the very heart of the Vatican lies what is believed to be the tomb of the Apostle Peter. Situated directly beneath the main altar of St. Peter's Basilica, this site has attracted pilgrims since at least the 2nd century. When Constantine ordered the construction of the first basilica, it was specifically to honor this spot. Modern excavations, carried out in the 1940s, uncovered a burial complex with overlapping graves, inscriptions, and a monument referred to by ancient writers as the Trophy of Gaius, believed to mark Peter's resting place. Away from the crowds, the Tower of the Winds rises as a hidden marvel of science and faith. Built in the 16th century under Pope Gregory XIII, the tower was part of a larger effort to reform the Julian calendar. Inside, it houses an astronomical meridian that uses sunlight to track seasonal changes with remarkable precision. The tower played a critical role in verifying the need for calendar reform, eventually leading to the Gregorian calendar used today. Its interior walls are decorated with frescoes by artists from Raphael's workshop, blending science, symbolism, and beauty. The Vatican isn't all marble corridors and frescoed ceilings. The Vatican Gardens, which cover nearly half the area of the city-state, have been in development since the late 13th century. Laid out across more than 20 hectares, the gardens are divided into distinct sections that reflect different traditions of landscape design: Italian formal geometry, French symmetry, and the more naturalistic curves of the English style. Among the many features hidden within this green world is the Eagle Fountain, a tiered structure nestled among cypress trees and hedges, known for its intricate stonework and flowing water that offers both refreshment and symbolism. The Vatican is not just a place of prayer or pilgrimage. It's also one of the world's most enduring centers of knowledge. At the core of this intellectual legacy stands the Vatican Apostolic Library. Its shelves hold over 1 million printed volumes, 75,000 manuscripts, and thousands of rare items, illuminated codices, ancient maps, early scientific treatises, and fragile parchments written in dozens of languages. What makes the collection so significant is its continuity. It preserves documents that have survived plagues, wars, reforms, and revolutions. Though not open for general public browsing, the library grants access to accredited scholars engaged in serious research. Closely linked to this institution is the Vatican Apostolic Archive, a name that replaced the more familiar Secret Archive in 2019 to clarify its function. Despite the air of mystery it often inspires, the archive is a structured, meticulous collection of papal correspondence, diplomatic treaties, church council documents, and administrative records dating back to the 8th century. Education, too, has a place within the Vatican's mission. Institutions like the Pontifical Academy of Science provide training for researchers and professionals from around the world. In 1984, the entire territory of Vatican City was officially inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. This recognition doesn't highlight a single monument or museum, but a complex network of historical, architectural, artistic, and symbolic value concentrated in a remarkably small space. Its inclusion is not tied to its religious function, but to its cultural legacy, a legacy that spans continents and centuries. The decision to include the Vatican was based on 4 specific UNESCO criteria. Under criterion number 1, the site is seen as a masterpiece of human creative genius. This refers not only to Michelangelo's ceiling in the Sistine Chapel or Bernini's colonnade in St. Peter's Square, but to the overall synthesis of art and architecture created by generations of the most influential artists in Western history. Criterion number 2 recognizes the Vatican's impact on the development of architecture and the visual arts. From Renaissance innovations to Baroque theatricality, the structures within Vatican walls shaped the aesthetic direction of entire cultures. Criterion number 4 highlights the Vatican as an outstanding example of an architectural ensemble that represents a major stage in human history. The harmony between basilicas, palaces, museums, and public spaces illustrates how urban form can reflect both function and identity. Finally, criterion number 6 refers to the site's exceptional symbolic significance. It is tied not only to the history of Christianity, but also to diplomacy, cultural preservation, and international memory. These layers of meaning give the Vatican a global relevance that far exceeds its borders. UNESCO's protection extends to the full territory of the Vatican, not just the major landmarks, but also its gardens, archives, and structural layout. This comprehensive approach acknowledges that the value of the site lies in its unity. Even though it functions as a religious and sovereign entity, the Vatican is treated as a cultural environment that belongs, symbolically, to humanity. Its small size does not limit its importance. On the contrary, the scale makes the concentration of heritage even more remarkable. Preserving such a dense concentration of historical material requires constant effort. Inside the Vatican museums, dedicated conservation laboratories operate year-round. These teams work on a wide range of materials, from ancient mosaics and Renaissance frescoes to bronze sculptures, manuscripts, fabrics, and rare books. Specialists in chemistry, art history, and engineering collaborate to study degradation processes and apply restoration techniques. Handling millions of tourists each year brings logistical and preservation challenges. Visitor flow is carefully managed, with timed entry, route planning, and physical barriers that protect fragile areas from wear and humidity. Lighting is controlled to prevent damage to pigments. Air quality is monitored. In recent years, digital technologies have become crucial tools. High-resolution 3D scanning is used to document artworks, architecture, and archaeological spaces. These digital models serve both research and conservation, allowing experts to monitor changes over time, simulate damage scenarios, and plan precise interventions. Conservation at the Vatican is not reactive. It's continuous, disciplined, and quietly monumental in its own right. Here's what the numbers say about the world's smallest country. The Vatican covers just 44 hectares, making it the smallest country in the world. It fits entirely within the city of Rome and is smaller than many city parks or shopping malls. It has one of the highest population densities on Earth, over 1,800 people per square kilometer. Nearly 5 million tourists visit every year. The Vatican museums are the most visited site, with over 20,000 people per day in high season. The Sistine Chapel and St. Peter's Basilica top the list of attractions. Tourism is the main source of revenue. The museums generate around 100 to 150 million euros annually from ticket sales. The Vatican issues its own passports, coins, stamps, and vehicle plates. It has a post office, pharmacy, banking system, and internal radio service. Latin is the official language. Italian is used daily. Roughly 90 popes are buried within the Vatican, mostly under St. Peter's Basilica. The oldest artifacts date back over 3,000 years, including Egyptian sarcophagi and Mesopotamian tablets. The Vatican is far more than a religious center. It's a living archive of history, art, tradition, and symbolism packed into one of the smallest countries on Earth. From ancient tombs to Renaissance masterpieces, from hidden gardens to monumental basilicas, every corner holds a layer of meaning. And now it's your turn. Have you ever visited the Vatican? What impressed you the most? The Sistine Chapel, the silence of the Scavi, or the view from the dome? Or is it still on your list? Share your thoughts in the comments. What would be the first place you'd explore inside the Vatican walls?